Hello, everyone. Welcome to Geology of National Parks. Today we're going to be covering the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. My name is Mattie, and I'm the program manager at Girl Scouts of Silver Sage, and I'm joined here with Sarah, our program coordinator. A little bit of background on me and Sarah. We have done a couple of these episodes for you about different geology of national parks. We've covered Yosemite and Yellowstone. Today is Hawaii. And you're probably wondering, why geology? When I went to college, I studied geoscience, specifically geomorphology. I also taught earth science to high schoolers for a couple of years, and then I volunteered at the Idaho Museum of Mining and Geology. Sarah, would you like to share your background?
Sure. Just like Mattie, I studied geosciences in college. I had a emphasis in mapping and volcanology, so this is right up my alley. And I taught earth science for a year and also did a bunch of different research trips when I was in school.
Yeah, so today is definitely going to be Sarah's favorite day. We're going to talk a little bit about what Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is. We'll take you on a tour through the park of some of our favorite features. We'll talk about volcanoes, of course, the different types of volcanoes, and also the rocks that you'll see if you have ever visited this park. So for those of you who are joining in, please feel free to share where you are coming from, and also if you've ever been to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So Sarah, would you like to take us on a quick tour?
I would love to. All right, so Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is on the southern part of the Big Island of Hawaii, which is the one that's closest to the United States. The first thing I wanted to do was show you some of the bigger features on the island itself that aren't really in the park. So the first one is Mauna Kea. This translates to White Mountain from Hawaiian. It's a dormant volcano. I won't ruin everything because Maddie's going to go over this one later. The next one is Mauna Loa. This is another volcano. This one is actually considered active still, and it's called Mauna Loa because it translates to Long Mountain. This right here is Waiapai Valley. This is in the northern section of the island. This is the boyhood home of the first ruler of Hawaii. So this is very culturally significant to the people that live on the island, the native Hawaiians. This right here is the Black Sand Beach, or Punalulu Beach. And it's very significant to the island because there's only 4 of these actually in the entire world. One is in Guam, the other is in Norway, and then the last one is in the Galapagos Islands. What you'll see when you visit this park or this beach is the sand is very different than your regular beach. It's bright green, and you'll find out why later. Another one is the Black Sand Beach. So this one's a little less rare in the world, but still really cool. It's black because of all of the basalt, which is a type of rock that you see in Hawaii, and it's been eroded away and turned into sand. It's also a really cool place to see sea turtles. I've seen a couple of them here. So now we go into the park. We go into the park itself. So this is the crater at the top of Kilauea called Halemaumau. This is now an extinct crater. It doesn't look like this anymore, sadly, after the last recent eruption. But it was considered one of the biggest lava lakes in the world. And it was a really cool sight to see on a clear night. So now in the park, we have several different features as well on the banks of Kilauea. We have a volcano called Mauna Ulu. This translates to growing mountain. So this one is still growing at a fairly quick pace. It's grown almost 400 feet since 1969. And there's a section on this volcano where you can still see the rift or the crack in the earth where the lava came out. The next place we're going to go is the Pu'uloa petroglyphs. This is considered a sacred place for the people on the island. It contains over 23,000 different petroglyphs. A lot of them have special meaning that we don't really know much about. And they date all the way back to 1200 AD to 1450 AD. So they're not very old if you think about timelines. And the last one here on this slide is called the Loihi Sea Arch. This sea arch is 90 feet tall, and it's almost 550 years old. And the sad thing about this one is it's not going to last forever because sea arches are created by erosion from the ocean. And so eventually this sea arch is just going to be eroded away and it's not going to be there anymore. But we'll get more because the sea will continue to erode the coastline. So now we're going to go into this little section here that I have blocked off. It's more the main part of the park that most visitors get to see. The first place is called the Thurston Lava Tube. And this is a 500-year-old lava tube. It's about 50 yards long, and at its tallest, it's 20 feet tall. And what's really cool is if you look here at the picture on the bottom, you can kind of see the bathtub line is what geologists like to call it. The ring where the lava, how far the lava went up into the tunnel. The second place is called Kilauea Iki. This is a pit crater that actually shot lava over 1,900, almost 2,000 feet in the air back in 1959. There's places here where the rocks are still steaming and they're so hot that you can't touch them. This here is called Kawanakakoi. This used to be part of the Chain of Craters Road, but since the eruptions and the change in the wind patterns, they've since closed this part of the road, so you can only get there by hiking nowadays. But it's probably one of the cooler ways to see the lava lake. It's a different vantage point, and it's one of the closest places that you can get to this lava lake. And the last place I wanted to show you is called Volcano House. This is the only hotel in the park that is publicly accessible. There's other places that are military accessible, but this is the only publicly accessible hotel in the park. And it's been there since 1877. And it's been renovated and rebuilt several times. It sits right at the edge of the crater, so it gives you a great view of the lava lake at night. And Mark Twain actually stayed there a couple of times. Okay, Mattie, do you want to tell us about the different types of volcanoes?
Thanks, Sarah. I'd love to. So this is an exciting week to be talking about volcanoes for a couple reasons. It is the 40th anniversary of Mount St. Helens erupting. That was yesterday. So I'm going to go through the different types of volcanoes. And then I'll talk a bit about which one Mount St. Helens was versus which ones we see on Hawaii. So the first picture you see on the top left corner, that's called a cinder cone. And that is our most simple, sorry, not top left, middle, bottom. There we go. That's our most simple type of volcano. They're built up from blobs of congealed lava as it ejects out, and we call those cinders. And they start to build up around the vent, making it bigger and bigger. Essentially, it's built around one main vent that moves magma through it. The second type of volcano is called a composite volcano, and that's the top left picture. The difference here is that it's built up of layers of ash and then lava and then cinders and then bombs and then other volcanic material. And so it's almost like a cake of different materials, and each one of those layers is a different eruption that happened. Now, it's still around one central tube of lava, but what's different is there might be outcroppings that go out from that lava tube to create smaller eruptions outside of the volcano. And then the last one is called a shield volcano. It's built almost entirely of fluid lava. So think of the lava you would see on Hawaii, that really more calm, fluid, not explosive lava. That's what these shield volcanoes are made out of. And it creates a very broad, gently sloping, it looks almost like a warrior shield, which is why it's called a shield volcano. So in Hawaii, we see these shield volcanoes, and that's mainly because of the type of lava that erupts out of those volcanoes. So this basalt comes out, it's more fluid. There are a couple of different names for it that I think Sarah and I will talk about later, probably. Yeah. And so that's why it has that shape. In comparison, some of the larger volcanoes, when you think of like a stereotypical volcano, we're looking at a composite volcano. So these are really steep. They often have very explosive eruptions. So you can think of Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Shasta in California, Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, and Mount St. Helens. So 40 years ago yesterday, Mount St. Helens erupted, and it had been documented, and geologists were all over this mountain really trying to see what was going to happen. They had compared it to other composite volcanoes that had erupted in the past. But what happened with Mount St. Helens is instead of erupting up, it erupted out. And so all the force, instead of going up, out into the atmosphere, it blew the side of the mountain out. And this meant that a lot of ash was able to transport over a long way. And so I have a jar of ash here. It is like my favorite possession. My boyfriend's family lives in Central Washington, and so they are farmers, and his dad went out with a strawberry jar and scooped up all of this ash from Mount St. Helens. All right, Sarah, do you want to talk about Hawaii as a hotspot?
Let's do it. So Hawaii is a little bit different than all of the volcanoes that we've talked about, such as St. Helens and Rainier. This is on a hotspot, so there's not actually a plate boundary where Hawaii is. So what happens is there's a thin place in the Earth's crust, on this oceanic crust, where lava can get through from the mantle. There's a plume that's below the crust that is feeding these volcanoes. So over time, it moves over, the plate moves over the hotspot. So as the plate moves over the hotspot, those islands are being created over time. And so what's been going on for almost 80 million years is this hotspot has been slightly moving in comparison to a much faster moving plate, and it's moved to the east or to the west. And you can see the Hawaiian chain right here in this photo. This is the big island of Hawaii that I'm pointing to. And over time, this plate has moved all the way west, and then it gave a sudden turn and goes north. This is called the Emperor Island chain. None of these islands here are above water anymore, but they were all created by the same hotspot, and it goes over 200 or 2,000 miles long. So it's been active for a very, very long time. And it's created Hawaii, it's created Maui, it's created Molokai. So all of these different islands were created by this one very specific hotspot. Okay, you ready for this one, Mattie?
Yeah. So you might think of Hawaii as each one of those islands being an individual volcano or an individual feature from the hotspot, but a lot of these islands are made up of different volcanoes, and the big island of Hawaii is in fact made up of 5 different volcanoes. So we're going to go through each one of them, and I just have some fun facts to share. If you've had any questions along the way, feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll be able to answer hopefully any of your questions. So the first volcano we're going to talk about is Kilauea. So Kilauea is Hawaii's most active volcano. So a lot of lava is coming out of that one. It's around 210 to 280,000 years old, and it emerged from sea level 100,000 years ago. So it's only been above sea level for 100,000 years. Kilauea has erupted nearly continuously since 1983, so it has not stopped erupting lava. And NASA has used this area geologically to train Apollo astronauts in recognizing volcanic features and planning traverses and collecting samples and taking photographs. And Sarah will be able to talk a bit more about that with her basalt trip. The next volcano is Mauna Loa. This one is the biggest volcano in Hawaii. It's erupted 33 times since 1843 and 1984, and it's been silent for more than 30 years, but scientists do feel that an eruption will still happen from this volcano, so it's not considered dormant, it's still considered active, we just haven't seen an eruption lately. This volcano's last eruption in 1984 spread across almost 4.5 6,000 hectares, which comes out to 6,000 football fields. So that was the last eruption. 6,000 football fields of new earth was created. The next one is Mauna Kea. That's the really tall one right there. This is the tallest mountain on Earth. Above water, or from like the base of the mountain to the top, it's 13,796 feet. But if you were to actually measure this from the bottom of the mountain, which starts at the bottom of the sea, it's over 33,000 feet tall, which makes it much taller than Mount Everest. Mount Everest is 29,000 feet tall. Mauna Kea is dormant, so it is not active. We're not expecting any volcanic activity from it. And mainly it was created during the birth of this island itself. So that's the main volcano that helped to create this island. It last erupted 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. And so because of that long period of no activity, we can call it a dormant volcano. Something that I found out really cool, you learned last time I love glaciers, is that there is evidence of 2 different glacial events on this volcano. So at some point, this island did have glaciers on it, and that helped to create some of the really cool topography that we see on Mauna Kea. The next one is Hualalai. This one began erupting 800,000 years ago and broke sea level 300,000 years ago. So this is a lot older volcano than the other ones on this island. It stopped erupting in 1801, so we can pretty much call it a dormant volcano. And it's the 3rd youngest and really dwarfed by the 2 volcanoes next to it, Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. It's a little one. The last one is Kohala. This is the oldest volcano on Hawaii, the island of Hawaii. Its large valley cuts out, including the Waipo Valley. So because this has been here for so long, it's had a lot of time to be eroded and get new features. And so that's where we get to see some really cool places like Waipo Valley. And this one has not erupted for the last 10,000 years, so it is definitely a dormant volcano.
And what I think is really cool is think about extinct volcanoes that doesn't exist on this island. There are no extinct volcanoes technically on this island. They're either active or dormant. So this is another picture from satellite view, just showing how big Mauna Loa actually is. It's actually considered the biggest volcano in the world, volume-wise. All right. So Hawaii, like Mattie has been saying, I guess we have a question. How old are the other islands? So the other islands are in the millions. So if we go back to this picture right here, Maui is about 1 point. Huh?
Oh, you got it? I got it up real fast if you need it.
It's about 1.3 million years old for Maui. Molokai is about 1.8 million. Oahu, which holds the capital of Hawaii, Honolulu, is about 3.4 million years old. So geologically speaking, they're not that old.
And then Kauai is 5.1 million.
Yeah. All right, so just like Maddie's been saying, Kilauea has been erupting since about 1983, and it's finally slowed down a little bit now. But the coolest thing for me to think about as a geologist is the oldest lava flow that we can see in the park is from 1983. So there's a lot of people that are alive still that saw the first eruption in Kilauea. All of these different lava flows represent a time. So the gray lava flow that you see, the dark gray, is from 1983 to 1986. The bright or the yellow orange color is from 1992 to 2007. The red is from 2007 to 2008. And then that brighter yellow is 1986 to 1982. And so you can notice that they're kind of overlapping one another, and the younger ones definitely show more than the older ones. But the most significant eruption for us nowadays was the one that happened 2 years ago on May 3rd, 2018 is when it began erupting. So this was not unexpected. Geologists were prepared for this to happen. Things like earthquakes were starting to create a little bit of disruption in the area. The lava lake was filling up. The ocean entry stopped. There was no more ocean entry for lava. So we could tell that the tubes, so there's tubes underneath this whole area that are lava tubes, and those were kind of backing up, kind of like a sewer would back up. Things were getting clogged up, and so we knew something was going to happen. And on May 3rd, the eastern rift zone of Kilauea finally erupted in what is called Leilani Estates in the Puna district of Hawaii. So this is the southeastern section of Hawaii, just a little bit on the side of Hilo. So it's north, actually, of the park itself. This was one of the biggest eruptions that they've seen in a long time. It's the 62nd event since the volcano started erupting in 1983. It filled a bay in Kapoho. It filled Kapoho Bay, and it actually took out a couple of coral reefs. So those are no more. But if you look at this, go back. This red section, that bright red section, is actual new coastline that the volcano created. So the black line is what the coast used to look like, and the bright red is all brand new coastline. So over time, these volcanoes have been spreading and creating new islands, and that's why these islands get bigger and bigger over time. So this here is a picture of Leilani Estates. It's a community in the Puna district that has lots of different houses, lots of trees. It's the same exact picture from 2017 and 2019. So 2017 before the eruption took place, and then 2019 after the eruption took place. And what you notice is what Mattie and I really thought was interesting was the part of houses that are left over. It's actually greener now than it was before. And the Hawaiians call these kapikus. They're called that because they're isolated from the rest of the vegetation. So they tend to house different species of plants and animals that the rest of the land doesn't, because it's so isolated. Okay, Mattie, are you ready to tell us about the different rocks?
Yeah, so Debbie has a really good question here. What's the difference between an extinct and a dormant volcano? So an extinct volcano is one that has not erupted in human history. So we have no record of it erupting. A dormant volcano still could erupt. Often it means that there's still some sort of heat source, some sort of magma chamber underneath. So it could still erupt. It hasn't. Some examples of those are like Mount Fuji, Mount Rainier. Well, they're dormant, but could still erupt. And if they are extinct, they have not in human history. So in terms of the rocks, there's a lot of really cool rocks on Hawaii. And this is how Sarah and I first bonded, was over these rocks. The first one that we want to talk about is called olivine. So that's going to be this bottom left picture, the green rock. Olivine is a mineral that's found in basalt, that black rock that's surrounding it. It's green in color, and this is that same green that creates the green sand beach that Sarah showed you earlier on our tour. A really cool fact about olivine is that our mantle is mostly comprised of olivine. So the earth is mostly made, or like around 50% made of olivine, this green material, but it's so deep in our earth. And by the time it reaches the surface, it is so easily eroded and worn. If you go to this beach and you even like touch one of these rocks, it just kind of disintegrate in your hand. So you can really see how it became sand. The next one, basalt, that top right rock is a really good picture of that. Basalt is a rock made from cooled lava that is cooled outside of the volcano. So it has erupted and cooled really fast. Because it cools really fast, it has that those air pockets, and it doesn't have crystals in it like you would see in like granite or something else. Um, Basalt usually contains other minerals, so that, like we talked about, olivine, but also plagioclase feldspar and pyroxene. So you can find really cool minerals inside of basalt. The next one are sulfur crystals. If you remember from when we talked about Yellowstone, sulfur, while it smells like rotten eggs, is actually really pretty. So this middle bottom picture is of sulfur. It's these bright, almost neon crystals, and you can find them all over in Hawaii. Sarah can correct me, but I saw them a lot, especially near vents. Anytime there's some sort of gas coming out of the earth, there are sulfur crystals around it.
So volcanoes actually release sulfur dioxide, which is why we get those sulfur crystals when they cool at the vents.
Very nice. And the last one is called Pele's hair. So that's the two pictures on the right-hand side. Pele's hair is a form of lava. It can be more defined as volcanic glass. They're very thin fibers, strands of volcanic gas, and they're usually found in gaps near vents, treetops, telephone poles, skylights, and they get carried around in the wind because they're so thin and airy. It's not recommended to touch Pele's hair because it's very brittle and sharp, and it can cut you like a sliver. So if you think of like insulation, how it looks all fluffy, but it's actually made of really sharp material, that's what Pele's hair is like. And the last one up in the top left, I'm assuming that one's obsidian. But something really cool happens when lava hits water and cools extremely fast, and it creates a glassy texture that we see in obsidian. So if you've ever seen arrowheads, that really shiny black, that's obsidian. And so in a chunk of rock, you'd see obsidian, but if it were to be kind of stretched out, that would be more like Pele's hair, still a form of volcanic glass.
Yeah, you're right, Kathleen. Pele is the goddess of fire in Hawaii. She's very sacred. Her home is known to be Halemaumau, which was the lava lake, and that was a very, very sacred spot for Native Hawaiians. And there's some really cool stories about Pele online, too. All right, so I saw that Jessica had a question about underwater volcanoes creating islands. She kind of read our minds because the next slide is all about this seamount called Loihi. This is this is the new, I don't want to say new island because they're not sure if it's going to go through the surface of the ocean quite yet. But if you can kind of see in the map, this is a Google Earth image. The red circle is around the Loihi seamount. That picture on the bottom left is a picture of a piece of Loihi that they brought up on one of the expeditions. And that was in the Jagger Museum of the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which also sadly isn't there anymore. But Loihi is just the newest seamount that we see. It's intermittently active. It's growing pretty quickly because it's already almost 3,000 meters above the seafloor. They're not sure yet, though, if it's going to breach the surface. If it does breach the surface, it may just be the new island, the beginnings of the new island of Hawaii. Or if it grows fast enough, it may just add itself onto the big island of Hawaii. But it's too soon to tell because it's going to take tens of thousands of years before it even thinks about reaching the surface of the ocean because the ocean's pretty dang deep around there. It actually started erupting in August of 1996. So I'm older than this volcano. And these volcanoes have a pretty uniform growth rate. They grow about 10 inches a year. So just under 10 inches a year. Each of those volcanoes grows about that every single year. All right, so the last part of our presentation is about jobs that you could do if you want to study volcanoes. So this picture here, the big picture with lots and lots of people in it, is a research group called Basalt. It is a NASA-funded project. So in this picture, you see volcanologists, you see biologists, you see astronauts, there's engineers, there's computer scientists, Not all of them worked for NASA, and they all decided that they wanted to create a project that studied all the volcanoes and the fissures or the cracks in the park and think about what kind of things could live there and what kind of bacteria could live there. And if you look and see, those two black and white pictures are the astronauts, is what they called them. They carried all this gear and they had microphones and they talked back to mission control. They were testing how astronauts would be able to communicate and walk around in this area, because Mars, this is actually a prelude for a mission to Mars, a human and robotic mission to Mars. And so they're trying to figure out how this could work out. And it was a really fun expedition, and they learned a lot out of it. So another job would be a volcanologist. As a volcanologist, you could work pretty much anywhere in the world where you find a volcano. You would measure earthquakes, you would measure gas emissions, things like that. It's a pretty fun job, but it can get really dangerous really quick. And you could also work in underwater volcanology, which is something that's not very well known, but is becoming more well known now that Loihi is more well studied. So the Loihi seamount is one of the best studied seamounts right now. And there's a whole other project, a sister project from Basalt called Subsea, that is actually studying this Loihi seamount and looking at the life of the bacteria that live down there and trying to compare that to a moon of Saturn called Enceladus. So that's something else that you could do if you want to study volcanoes.
Sarah, can you share a bit about what you did during Basalt? Like what was maybe some tasks that you had?
So yeah, I am in this picture in the top. I'm the kid in the tie-dye t-shirt. And I was invited to this project by my professor, who was one of the leaders of this project. And I was we called ourselves the Mars rover. So what we did was we followed the astronauts out into the field every day from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We hiked around in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in 2 different sections. And I was able to do instrument readings, and I was able to place down cards for sample reading and to help collect samples. And then I was also part of the science team where we were all in our computer lab, and the astronauts sent back pictures, and we as a team decided which ones we wanted as samples and how well we could work with those samples. And we were also the people that disinfected everything every day. So we couldn't have anything cross-contaminating, is what biologists called it. So we had to disinfect the rock hammers every day. We had to disinfect everything every single day. And so it was a really fun 2 weeks. We were working from 7 a.m. until about 10 p.m. every night. We stayed in the park. It was wet, it was rainy, it was the middle of November, and I didn't get to wear shorts at all in Hawaii. But it was a very good experience.
Thanks for sharing, Sarah. So at this point, everyone, if you have any questions about Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, any questions about Sarah's basalt trip or what it means to be a volcanologist, now is your time to drop it into the comments. So feel free to type in the chat box if you have any questions for us. I noticed a couple people said they were there right before the eruption, and I was too. I was there a week before. And the crater was so calm. It was flat and calm and just nothing happening. And then right when we got home, we had heard it erupted, and it was insane.
Yeah, we were there on a school trip a week before it erupted. And we actually met with the volcanologist at the Hawaii Volcano Observatory. And he told us that it was just a matter of days before the volcano erupted. And we got home, and about 4 days later, it erupted. Ooh, the square feet of the whole island? I'd have to look that up.
You're still, I think, sharing.
Yeah, the square footage of the state of Hawaii. So the big island of Hawaii is 4,000 square miles. So not actually that big. You can actually drive around the big island in less than a day.
Very doable. How hot is lava? Lava kind of varies, but around 1,300 to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Extremely hot.
So the hotter stuff will be your shield volcano lava, just because it moves a lot faster. Your cooler stuff will be things in strato or composite volcanoes.
Oh wow, my favorite part. Okay, I have an anecdote to that one. My favorite part. I have always been a huge like geology person, of course, so the rocks knocked my socks off. I'd never seen a turtle before, and I was out on a kayak, and I said to my boyfriend, I said, I really want to see a turtle. And he said, I bet if you sing a sea shanty, you will. So I sang Baby Shark, but like Baby Turtle, and a turtle pops up right in front of me in the water out of nowhere. And I saw the turtle, and that was just, for me, being able to see something like that was the most amazing experience.
I think mine is also related to kayaks, surprisingly. So for those of you that know me, I am terrified of boats, of on running water. So kayaks are not my jam. And we went on this school trip for a week, and this professor that I went with, I trusted with my life. And she told me that she would not let me drown. So I trusted her. And we went sea kayaking. And we were over on the Kona side of the island in a place called Captain Hook's Memorial. And we got up at the crack of dawn because the other professor we were with wanted to see the dolphins. So we were sea kayaking at about 5 a.m. And we get out there, and I am terrified. And all of a sudden, we just stop, and these spinner dolphins start jumping out of the water. And we all get in the water, and we start swimming with them. And it was the coolest thing, because it was a whole pod of them. So there's probably about 20 different spinner dolphins all around us. And then we kept kayaking for a little while longer, and we got back in the water, and right by Captain Hook's Memorial is a giant coral reef. And it was probably the clearest water I've ever seen in my life. And so you could see all the different colors. It's a great question. It kind of depends on the lava. So the lava that we see in composite volcanoes is very thick, very sticky, not very hot in comparison. So it doesn't get very far. I think the furthest it reaches is within a mile of the actual volcano. But when you get into those higher temperatures, the runnier lavas, I don't even know, miles, I'd say. I wouldn't say tens of miles. Mattie?
I think kind of what you said, it really would depend on like location. If it's near something downhill, it could travel faster. Wind can affect things. But I think, yeah, overall, just that if it's something, the term is called viscous. So if you can imagine you have a straw full of honey and a straw full of like water, you try and blow both of them, the water is going to go out easier and like flow farther. That's that more liquidy lava, the hotter lava that Sarah's talking about. While as like honey in a straw, really hard to blow out, and when you do, it kind of explodes, and that's more composite volcano, so it can still go far, but less of like any kind of control or idea where it's going to go. Hopefully that helps.
We're getting a lot of questions. So Janelle, I see if you asked me if I saw all the rocks that Mattie talked about, yep, all of those pictures were actually mine that I took while I was out with my research group, and it was a lot of fun because we actually got to go places that regular visitors weren't allowed to go to. So we actually got to go inside of the crater. and visit like the vents there, and we got to see sulfur banks. I like to call it a sulfur beach because it was yellow sand and it smelled like rotten eggs, and we got to do some research there. So yeah, I saw all those different types of rocks, and I got cut by Pele's hair, so that's not a fun experience.
Didn't you lose your keys in lava too? Or someone
No,
did?
that was not me. That was a friend. That was one of our coworkers. Yeah, he dropped his keys.
There's a good question for that. Do you have to wear special shoes when walking on lava? Hardened lava?
I didn't. I just wore hiking boots. It's just a matter of staying far enough away that you don't get into the hottest part of it, and being smart about where you step, just because you don't want to fall through. That's not a good idea. What else do we have? I see one that says how much of the park is accessible versus parts that are unsafe for people. So that's changed since Mattie and I were there, because we were there before it erupted. But when we were there, a part of the road for Chain of Craters Road was blocked off. You could still hike back, but you weren't allowed to drive back. And now, if I remember right, an even larger part of that is blocked off because the museum that used to house the Hawaii Volcano Observatory is now at the bottom of the caldera, or of the crater. So that is no longer there. So that part you can't drive to anymore. And then they've blocked off an even greater part of the other side of Chain of Craters Road. So that has to do less with lava than it has to do with gas emissions. So we always had to check and see which way the wind was going, because like I said earlier, volcano lets out sulfur dioxide, and when you breathe that in and it reacts to the water in your lungs, it actually turns into sulfuric acid. So it's kind of like a very bad chemical peel for your lungs, and you start coughing, and it's not a very pleasant experience.
I saw a good question about metal. Can lava break down metal? Yeah, so not all, but a lot of melting points for metal are around 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, and lava burns at around 1300 to 2700 degrees Fahrenheit. So it would definitely break down metal. In fact, in lava, we don't really know the actual composition of magma because it's in the earth, so we can't really test it. But part of that composition is metals. It's why we find things like iron in rock, is because the lava that used to be contained some sort of iron material, and when it cooled down, it hardened into rock.
If you want to see a really cool YouTube video, look up lava flows in Hawaii taking down car. It's a really cool video. Gonna hit this one, Mattie?
Oh, I was like, do you? I don't know how many times. It's been so. The thing about Kilauea is that it has been erupting continuously since 1984. So not that there has been a number of times, but it hasn't stopped since 1984. I don't have any research on before that, unless Sarah has some information.
I don't know anything about that, no.
But Christina, it's a great question. If you find the answer, you should let us know.
Yes, you should. I see that Lily wants to know if kids are allowed to hike it. Yes, kids are allowed to hike in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. It's a very cool place to hike. If you're adventurous and you love to hike, I would suggest doing Kilauea Iki. It's probably one of the coolest places to hike. I personally hate it because it's 40 stories down, and then you have to go 40 stories back up. And it's all switchbacks, so not my personal favorite place to hike, but it's definitely one of the coolest places in the park to hike. So two currently are considered active. Mauna Loa and Kilauea are both considered active. The other three are considered dormant. do we have?
All right. If you have any last questions, please make sure to drop them into the chat box. We'll spend a couple more minutes answering questions.
No.
Ooh, that's creative. Wow.
If you actually want to know a story on that, Iceland is the only place I've ever seen successfully stop a volcano. And that's because they shot ice cold ocean water onto it continuously for over a week. And the only reason that it worked is because the volcano stopped erupting. They were doing this because it was closing off their port. So this was on an island of Iceland. That was the only way in or out on the island, and it was closing up the port. So that's the only reason they were doing it. But I've never really known another person or group of people try to stop a volcano.
I think what's important to think about there is if you go back to the layers of the earth and you really look at the mantle, it's a huge force of energy that we're working with, and that's what's powering these volcanoes, are these tectonic forces that are just something that is out of the control of people. So it's important for us to learn how to react to them and how to be prepared instead.
So I think the best way for us to answer this question is the types of lava flows is probably the better way. Lava it's hard to study because you can't really study lava in general. It's just too hot. And every type of lava is its own thing and its own temperature. But lava flows is very specific, and it's really cool. There's two specific lava flows. You'll see both of them in Hawaii. If you're in Idaho and you ever visit Craters of the Moon, you can see both of them there too. There's A'a, which is a very crumbly, broken up type of lava. So if you kind of look at the picture on the bottom of my screen with the person's back facing, he's kind of facing A'a. And then there's Pohoihoi, which is that ropier lava, so it's more smooth. It looks like ropes in the lava flow. And you can see both of those in Hawaii and in pretty much any volcanic landscape that has shield volcanoes.
Sadie has a good question that goes with that. Should you call it lava or magma? This is one of those things that once you start studying geology, you get really like nitpicky about. If it is still in the earth or in the volcano, it is called magma. If it goes outside of the volcano and it is exposed to the air, it is lava. So essentially, if you can see it, it's lava. If it's still in the earth doing its thing, it's magma.
That depends on the volcano again. I think the longest I've ever heard of is the Hawaii Kilauea volcano. So that's almost 30 years of continuous lava flow. Most composite volcanoes are pretty short time spans comparison to shield volcanoes. Composite volcanoes are a one boom and done type situation. Versus a shield volcano is a continuous breaks in the earth as it moves around. So usually they last longer than composite volcanoes. I see one that says, is there anything lava can't break down? I would say rocks, maybe.
Yeah, something interesting that you might want to go look at is how people in Hawaii prevent lava from affecting like fire poles and stuff. Sometimes they'll surround things with cinders, so like broken up chunks of lava, and they'll surround them in big piles so that it goes around it. But there's a lot of research and time being built into specifically how to make sure lava doesn't break things down.
Nicole wants to know if there's a lot of lava tubes in Hawaii. Oh, sorry. If there's a lot of lava tubes in Hawaii. Yes, there's tons. They're all underground. That's how, if anyone has ever been there and saw the ocean entry, that's how the ocean entry was created. Lava in those lava tubes can move so much faster than when the lava's on the top of the surface, because they don't have that cool air to cool it down. So it just goes and goes and goes until it stops.
So I know there's been a couple questions about what we're doing next. So we'll give you a little sneak peek of that. In the meantime, any final questions, please drop them off. Thank you all so much for taking time to view this video, for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed learning about Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Next week, or sorry, not next week, week after, so in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing the Grand Canyon. So another one that I am so stoked about. We'll be talking a bit about deserts and sedimentary rocks. So going away from the volcanoes into the desert. So be prepared. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook page so that you can see that event when it pops up.
Do you want to do a couple more?
Yeah, if you see some more you want to do.
I see one that says, is there a way to handle lava? So with your hands, no, I don't think there is. Most geologists that sample lava do it with a rock hammer. So that's just, a rock hammer is about yay long. So probably about 1 foot to 1.5 feet long. It's blunt on one end and it's sharp on another end. And so they use the sharp end to kind of poke into the lava and scoop it up. I've heard from volcanologists, they like to use metal kitchen spoons because so when you go into the lava with a rock hammer, it brings out a string of lava instead of a glob of lava. And so it's so brittle that it usually breaks before it cools down. But when you have a metal kitchen spoon, you can just take that glob of lava and it'll cool as a glob, as a rock, instead of as a string. So that was a fun fact I learned.
Sarah, I think you can answer this question. Did they get everything out of the museum before the eruption?
Yeah, that I know of, they did. They had a bunch of really cool paintings in there. Some really old equipment from volcanologists and seismologists. So they had a really old seismograph there that you could actually jump and it would do its thing there. And yeah, as I know of, they got everything out.
Doodle dog. No plants or animals can live in volcanoes. There are plants and animals that live outside or on the volcano. Sometimes plants like it there because volcanic ash is really nutritious for plants. But no, they cannot live in the volcano.
It's actually very nutrient rich. That's why southern Idaho is full of farms, because it's all volcanic ash. And that's why Hawaii is full of farms. Some of the best fruit I've ever had.
Honestly. All right. Well, thank you all again so much for being here and watching our live. Make sure to check out our Facebook page for upcoming events. And thank you again for being here. We really appreciated having you.